Hey guys, I'm gonna start off with my music. It's my first live show. Probably gonna be really short because I don't know what I'm doing. But I am Rachel, the host of Everybody Has Stuff. Again, today's my first live episode, and I'm probably gonna go over more of the harm reduction today and something called cross addiction. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. So stay tuned for that. All right. Again, this is my first time kind of going live, and it's quite interesting. It took me a little bit of time to get everything set up because I'm a perfectionist. So, so today I really wanted to talk to you guys about cross addictions mainly. Now, I don't know if you guys really know what that is or not. I kind of set up a poll. I don't know if you can see it on Facebook. For those of you on Insta, you can check that out on my Facebook page. Everybody Has Stuff. And I ask, do you think cross addiction is legit? So what is cross addiction? First and foremost, cross addiction is basically when someone is addicted to more than one thing, more than one substance. This kind of ties in hand with harm reduction because, as we talked about before, there are some people who believe that they can still drink even though their drug of choice was heroin or opiates or cocaine or crack or whatever, something like that. And obviously I know this is a really touchy subject because many people in recovery believe in the abstinence model, which is totally fine. Whatever works for each person works. I have just found, and I have found that for myself that abstinence works. I can't put anything into my body. It's just unfortunately, I just can't. I've tried, again, like I've said a billion times, to put anything into here, whether it's just alcohol or weed or something that you would think is less of a problem than, heroin or cocaine, meth, some other hardcore substance. But I found out that unfortunately, I'm not somebody that can successfully do this without it leading back to my drug of choice or to a harder substance, which tends to ruin my life. So, what I wanted to kind of talk about more and kind of ask you guys too about your opinions and whether, through your education, through your personal experiences, are you somebody that's able to do this? And if you are, how? How is this working for you? Please shed some insight to viewers and listeners. And also for me, because I'm not one of those people who can just drink or just smoke weed without it leading to some other crazy instance in my life where I go out of control again. So I would love the input. And again, I also have a poll down there on Facebook that says, do you believe in harm reduction? Does that work for some people? Does it not? Does it depend? Why? Feel free to go ahead and join in and chat on Facebook. Like I said, Everybody Has Stuff. Come check out my page. You can go ahead and comment or like. I really want to get interactive with you guys. This is obviously the first time I'm doing this, so I'm hoping that as time goes, I will get a little bit better at doing this whole live thing, because I really want to include my listeners and your guys' opinions and thoughts and your personal experiences. So to go back, as far as, harm reduction goes, again, we are teaching abstinence, but what I've been learning in education is, and through my own experience, again, working in, rehabs and treatment centers, working with the drug court clients, harm reduction isn't this or it doesn't have to be this big elephant in the room, right? Sometimes the harm reduction piece is just temporary, just to go ahead and help that person to reach a point where they're able to realize that they want to become abstinent. And I really think that this is an important topic to discuss because I don't think everybody understands what harm reduction really means. It does not mean that, some people get to just do whatever they want with no consequences. I mean, I guess they can, right? It's their life, but it's a way that we as clinicians want to use this technique to help people get to the point where their life is manageable, where they are able to function still and do the things that they love. We want them to be able to feel productive, to feel a sense of purpose again at whatever means that is. If that means that they're going to smoke a joint instead of shooting heroin every day for now or forever, whatever, that's not the point. We want them to live a healthier, happier, productive, safer life. It's also a way to prevent, the overdoses, as we kind of discussed before. Well, I discussed in the previous episode. So how do we do this? How is harm reduction? I'm sure some of you in the field, or all of you in the field, and even people who have been through treatment, those who haven't, there's a thing called motivational interviewing. Now, this is a technique that we use with these clients to help them build their own belief in themselves. Okay, cool. There you go. Much better, much better. Okay, so as I was saying, we use motivational interviewing as a way to... No, what the heck's that? See, this is why a perfectionist / ADHD person can't be doing this. There's just too much going on. Motivational interviewing, we want to help the client or the person to reach the decision on their own of what is going to work best for them. And a lot of people who struggle with addiction know that we don't like to be told what to do. So when we have somebody who's shoving the abstinence piece down our throats, this could be leading to the problem of such an overdose problem. Obviously, that's not the only piece of it, but I think that when we change the way that we view addiction and the way that we view treatment for addiction, you might open ears of people who are more closed-minded when they're going to treatment and just being told, hey, look, you can't do anything ever again. That's a lot to take on, especially when you're early on in recovery. So we're trying to avoid this problem of a revolving door through treatment centers and in and out of 12-step programs and in and out of detoxes. I think it's important because we can only do so much, right? We can't hold their hand. What do they always say, right? You can bring a horse of water, but you can't force it to drink. It's the same thing. But I think if we're offering different approaches and allowing the client to feel more in control of their recovery, then we might have a better chance of them reaching a more productive, happy life. And I think it's hard for most of us in recovery who work in the field to grasp this concept of harm reduction because we have been told over and over again that abstinence is the only way, and that for most of us, we have attained abstinence, and it seems to be going pretty well for the most part. But for a lot of us, it took years and years, almost our whole lives. I know for myself, again, I've always said I started using at the age of 12, 13, and started with cigarettes, started with weed, drinking, the typical way that it progresses. And it took me my whole life to get to the point of recognizing that I was not able to put anything into my body without it destroying my life. So I think if we maybe take baby steps, and I view harm reduction as a baby step, and maybe for some people it's a permanent baby step because they might not ever get to complete abstinence, and that's okay because it might work for them. It's just, having this more open-minded discussion and viewing it as a more individualistic, if I could talk today, approach would be more beneficial, I think, for the clients and those who are struggling with addiction and mental health too, because it all plays a role. that's a whole other episode that I'll get into as far as addiction and mental health, the chicken or the egg, which came first. I think there's not really a complete answer on that either, but we'll dive into that on another episode because I want to bring in some people in the field that I know are experts on this stuff because of their own experiences as well as working in the field. So going back to the harm reduction piece of this, I think that it's really vital to let people find their own journey and then not shaming them or judging them along that way. They might come to the end of this harm reduction piece and realize, yeah, abstinence is the only way for me. I've tried it. But if we're looking to save lives here, which to me is the most important piece, and then building people up to a stable life and productive life and a happy life, then harm reduction is a good way to start, in my opinion. I think that if you're taking somebody who's shooting 2 bundles of dope, just 20 bags of heroin, which is a lot, especially nowadays with the fentanyl, someone's shooting 2 bundles of dope a day. Let's just give an example. If we can get that person down to, let's say, half a bundle to start, that's progress. But in the addiction world and the recovery realm of things, we just don't view that as good enough. And I think what we lose sight of is that this is a journey. This is a process. This is not like a one and done type of deal. If that was the case, again, like I've mentioned multiple times, that we wouldn't be having this issue of overdoses and the opiate epidemic. We wouldn't have problems of this fentanyl crap killing everybody right now. And we wouldn't have issues of rehab being a revolving door where the same client's going to the same treatment center 100 times and they still can't get it. Or they're going in and out of AA and NA 1,000 times and they still can't get it. And that's not to say that those things won't help them eventually, but let's help them take baby steps first. What's missing? What do they need personally to get to that point where that's going to work for them, And I think that it's really super important that we are playing that piece out. So for me, I would say that if I can get someone who's shooting 20 bags of dope to 5 bags of dope a day, to start, slowly. Well, obviously I think you would step down, 20 to 10, then to 5, 3, 2, 1, none. Maybe they're implementing smoking weed once they stop the heroin to get them through. It's all about what they want and their goals in harm reduction. This is not meant to be used as, well, I think I'm just gonna use something, anything, to get outside of myself right now. So I'm gonna let myself smoke weed and drink because at least it's not heroin. That's not what I mean by harm reduction, even though technically I guess that is a form of it. But the goal here with harm reduction is to get to the point where the person wants full recovery, where they're not using something outside of themselves to feel better about themselves. And that's what addiction is, right? We are, no one's choosing to put a substance into their body that's ruining their life or putting them at risk for an overdose and dying unless there's a reason, unless it's doing something for them. We don't do anything in this world unless we're getting something from it. And yes, people do get things out of being an addict, or else we wouldn't keep doing it, right? It takes away pain. It relieves stress. It helps us to really feel like we fit in maybe with certain people. It helps us to not feel like we want to kill ourselves every day. It's really stressful. And I don't think people realize that no one would choose purposely to put a substance into their body that's ruining their life unless they're getting something out of it. And the benefit is perceived as higher than the cost. And for me, I know shooting heroin and smoking crack and doing all these crazy things that I was doing, it was worth it for that, 10-second rush so that I didn't feel like I wanted to die every single day of my life, so that my brain would just shut up. My brain never would shut up. but it did with these substances, and it helped numb and like help me deal with my reality, which was really crappy, and a lot of my childhood trauma. And that's another piece of this. People don't realize that we struggle with trauma. Every addict. I don't care who you are. You can deny it up and down all you want. Maybe you just haven't realized what your trauma is per se. But you have trauma. We all do. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just wanted something to cope with, and we used substances to do that. Now, going into my next topic, which is cross addiction, addiction doesn't just mean a substance. I think that we've been kind of not brainwashed, but almost like conditioned to believe that when we hear addiction, we believe of a substance, right? But addiction can be a multitude of things. It can be food, it can be relationships, it can be sex, it can be anything that we become obsessive over that we are using to get outside of ourselves or to numb ourselves or to not deal. It like makes us feel amazing, but to the point where like it's interfering with our functioning in life. So no, it does not have to just be drugs, but our society has made addiction about that. So I think people forget that you can be addicted to other things. So this idea of cross addiction is real life, and I see it in my life. And looking back, I realize, now that my first addiction was, I think, food. Because I think growing up in an Italian household, you learn that food is love. And that's still the way today. I know even my wife, like if I'm having a crappy day, like she will come home with whatever my sweet treat of choice is that week to help boost my mood a little bit. And I do the same with her. It's just, I think we don't realize food as being an addiction because you need food to live. But obviously we can see with the obesity epidemic that's going on, that food is just not for survival at this point anymore. It's to feel good. It's a comfort thing. So for me, looking back retrospectively, it's obvious that as a young kid, food was my go-to. That was my first addiction. And then relationships. And I don't mean romantic, because as a kid, obviously, that's not something that you're thinking about, but friendships. I always needed to belong, and I talk about this in earlier episodes of my podcast. And when those things don't do the job anymore, I progress to substances because the dopamine that's produced by those are a lot more intense and do a lot more. At least they did for me. But so the point of the cross addiction topic is that when I got clean, I gained a lot of weight, and it was because when I was in the sober house, I was with a lot of girls who were, pretty thin and just kind of could eat whatever they wanted. And I forgot prior to my drug addiction that I had always really struggled with my weight. So I was just kind of going out to eat. That was like the thing to do in early recovery. You go to a meeting, you go get some coffee, you go get something to eat at the diner. And then it became an obsession because the food was calming me, it was numbing me, and it was doing its job. And I didn't need the drugs anymore, I had the food. So, hence, I'm struggling still with losing the weight that I've gained, 4 years later, over 4 years later. But it's so obvious how I am cross-addicted to multiple things. And I always say this, but I am like... Addiction is the disease of more. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what's put in front of me. I want more. I want more and I want more because it's never enough. And that's just part of my addicted brain because I do believe there is a biological and physiological piece of it that we, don't really know 100% about. But I know it and I feel it when I put something into my body and I see how I react versus somebody else who doesn't have that addicted brain. And again, I think it goes back to trauma. If you look at anybody who has trauma, I would say that they're addicted to something. It doesn't have to be substances again or even food, but if you look at relationships, because of this fear of abandonment, people can also be constantly grasping for relationships. Or I know people who are addicted to perfectionism. And we don't always think of that as an addiction, but it is. Always trying to fix, manage, and control every little thing. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of people in my family that are that way. There's people, I'm like that to an extent. There's people and friends that I know in recovery that are this way as well. So addiction can look like a lot of different things, especially when you've had trauma, and a lot of us have. So that's not abnormal. So this idea of jumping from one addiction to the next, to me, it's like, I don't really believe that we jump from one to the next. I think that it's just already inherently there, like this addicted brain piece. And if there's something that's going to boost that dopamine, and get us going, and outside of ourselves and numb ourselves in some way, then we can become addicted to it. It doesn't really have to just be a substance. Trauma is the biggest piece of this, and a lot of people don't want to recognize that, because I don't think everybody wants to believe that they have trauma, because then if, God forbid, they had to look at that, they would recognize, their parents didn't really do as good of a job as they think they did, or at least what they've been telling themselves their whole lives, that their parents were great. It's a hard pill to swallow, and no pun intended, but it's true. No one wants to have to admit that. No one wants to have to look back at their childhood. I have patients who sit in my chair, like, for the TMS treatment, and they, obviously this isn't therapy, but they kind of go into a lot of their different stressors with me in their past, and they talk about childhood experiences, and obviously I'm not giving them therapy, because I'm not licensed yet, but I listen, and I help them make connections, and they on their own are like, holy crap. Like, I have some serious trauma going on here that I didn't really realize that was traumatic for me. Because when people hear trauma, they think of rape, or they served in the military, like PTSD, severe, or they went through a severe disaster or something like that. But trauma doesn't have to be some big, crazy event that, the media has portrayed it to be in movies and things like that. But trauma is personal to each and every one of us, and what one person feels was traumatic is not going to be the same as someone else. So to me, like, I think we minimize and we suppress so many things that we don't realize were traumatic for us, and then we have these addictive behaviors in our lives because it is numbing that. It's taking ourselves outside of having to deal with it and allows us to continue to suppress it. So yes, I believe that cross addiction is real. I know it's real for myself because, again, I've just shared it and I've experienced it my whole life, jumping from one thing to the next. I have to be very, very cautious with things that give me this quick boost in dopamine. I never had issues with gambling, but I'll share this, over last year with quarantine and COVID, I was laid off because my job didn't need me. So I was panicking for money, and I had a coworker who, had done some gambling, and he was giving me pointers. So it started as a joke, to be honest, and I went on Golden Nugget and was gambling online, and to be quite honest, like, it was just luck, and I don't know, but I paid a lot of my bills last year with online gambling, and I remember, like, every time I would hit, like, that high, that rush I would get, and I was like, this is it. This is why people become addicted to this, and it's, not as intense as something like heroin, but it's there for sure. So I have to be very cautious with things because, again, this addicted brain of mine, anything that can take me outside of myself and boost these levels of dopamine that I might be lacking in, can become addictive for me. And that's why, as someone who's struggled with addiction their whole life, literally pretty much, I cannot just do things without being mindful of this, because it can lead me eventually back to my drug of choice, which are opiates, and like, even the gambling can get so out of control. I might not die from that, but I could lose my money, all of my money, and live miserably the way that you would do with addiction, right? A drug addiction. So for me, it's vital that I stay on top of that. And I think that's why also this idea of harm reduction is really touchy for people who are in recovery, because they would rather just not even risk it, which is smart, and that's what I've realized is I can't risk it. I can't really be just doing things without really being aware of it, or doing them at all, because it's not worth going back with, to what I was living with all of I've gained. I can't lose all of it. I've worked really hard. So I understand that whole concept and the fear of this harm reduction piece. However, not everyone is the same, and everyone's journey is different in getting to the point of realizing that maybe they have to be abstinent. And again, it goes back to jealousy too, because I think, some of us who are people who have to remain abstinent don't want to admit that there are people who can just, drink wine at night, a glass of wine at night, and survive, and it not turn into them smoking crack or something like that. So there is this little level of jealousy, but we need to get over that, especially if you're a practitioner or clinician in the field of addiction, because this cookie cutter way is just not working. Clearly, I've talked about this, in previous episodes as well, and it's frustrating to watch as someone who's in recovery and someone who works, in the field, because we're failing people. We really are, and it's unfortunate that so many people are losing their lives, when maybe if we just tried this other approach, it might change. So my hope with this whole podcast is really not just to hear myself talk, but to kind of just give my experience and to really give my opinions on things that I've seen that are working and things that aren't working and that need to change. And I would really love to hear your guys' experiences, and I'm always welcoming guests on the show if they want to come on and do an interview. I did one recently with my wife, who's an LSW, who also works in the addiction field. Most of her experience has been in the addiction field as well. She's, again, in recovery too, so we're both very passionate about this topic. So any experience that you might have, or if you have information that's contradictory to my beliefs, are totally fine too. I would love to just get input on this, because clearly my way is not the only way. I can only just share from my personal experiences. So I just think it's important too. I'm going to throw this out here. This is the SAMHSA National Hotline. It's for substance use treatment. However, they do have different the ability to hook people up with different public health agencies, and it's confidential. The number is 1-800-662-4357. Again, this is the SAMHSA National Hotline, 1-800-662-4357. I just wanted to kind of drop that resource out there if anyone is struggling and they need some help. Again, check out my website, www.whatsyourstuff.com. You can always reach out to me there. Here on IG, everybody has stuff. Facebook, everybody has stuff. I am in the process of working on a YouTube as well. I just really want to get my stuff out there so that I can help you guys with your stuff, because we all have it. We all got stuff, just whether or not we're working on it. And if you need help working on your stuff, please, 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 I'm begging you, please reach out. I'm always here to listen. If you need anything, I can try to find resources for you. I know we're all spread out all over the country, might not necessarily be here in Jersey, but I will do my best to hook you up with some resources. So if you're struggling, reach out. There's no shame in your game. And I will always be here to listen, non-judgmentally. And again, I'm not a licensed therapist yet. Almost there, getting there. Just finishing up my first year of grad school. So nothing that I say, again, I always like to kind of preface everything, even though this is kind of after the fact now. So, but I am not giving therapy, and this is not advice. This is just my opinion based on personal experiences. So I really hope that you guys got something from this. Again, this one's a little bit shorter because it's my first live episode. I'm just not really used to doing this, so I didn't want to go too long or too heavy into it. So keep an eye out for my next episode, and we will go into this further. I'm going to have a guest on. My friend Aaron's going to come on and speak and talk about his experiences in recovery and also in the field. So stay.